OpenClaw builds break in production, but mine doesn't. Most people think the reason is the model. Better prompts, smarter agent, bigger context window, but it isn't. The reason production builds break is architectural, and the fix has nothing to do with the LLM. I'm a software engineer. I just shipped an OpenClaw system that classified 10,000 companies overnight without losing a single record, without burning through tokens, and without me touching it. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what makes a production-grade OpenClaw build different from the demos you see online, and how to apply the same 5 components to your own system. Before we get into anything, we need to clear up the biggest misconception. Most people build OpenClaw agents like demos. They write a prompt, they wire up a tool, they hit run, and when it works once, they call it a system. But that's not a system, that's a coincidence. A demo is something that runs once on your laptop with you watching. A production build is something that runs 10,000 times unattended, recovers when it fails, costs what you expect, and produces output you can trust. Those are completely different engineering problems, and almost nobody in the OpenClaw space is teaching the second one. Here's the part most people miss. A reliable OpenClaw build is not one big agent, it's 5 distinct architectural layers, and if any one of them is missing, the whole thing collapses in production. I'm going to walk you through all 5 using a real system, an automated classifier that processed 10,000 companies and figured out which applicant tracking system each one uses. Don't worry about the specifics. The same framework works for any high volume job where you need to process thousands of records and get verifiable answers. Pure B2B work, the kind of task a junior analyst would burn 3 months on. Let's start with the first layer. Spec is code. Most people write prompts, loose instructions, vague guidance, a few examples in the system message. That works for a demo. It does not work for production. The first thing I did on this build was write a product requirements document for the agent, not for me, for the agent itself. Every subagent has its own spec file. These files define hard constraints, what the agent must output, what it must never do, the exact JSON schema, the timeouts, the retry policy, the cost budget. These specs are not suggestions, they are enforcement. Let me show you what that actually looks like. The orchestrator spec for this build has 6 sections. First, the role, 1 sentence describing what the agent is responsible for and nothing else. Second, the inputs, the exact schema of every record the orchestrator will receive, including required fields and types. Third, the outputs, the exact JSON schema the orchestrator must produce with no extra keys, no optional fields, and no creative liberties. Fourth, the operational constraints, timeout per record, max retries, escalation thresholds, hard cost ceiling per run. Fifth, red lines, a list of things the agent must never do, written in negative form, no invented data, no output without evidence, no retries beyond the configured max. Sixth, the handoff contract, exactly which subagents this orchestrator can call, in what order, and what it does with their responses. Every subagent has its own version of the same 6-section spec. They are short, they are precise, they are enforceable. The agent reads them at startup and treats them as the contract for the entire run. When something goes wrong, I don't rewrite the prompt, I update the spec, and the agent's behavior changes deterministically. Now let's talk about the second layer, the escalation pipeline. Most people send every task to their most expensive model. That is the single biggest waste of money in the OpenClaw ecosystem. In my classifier, I wired up 3 subagents in a cascade. Agent 1 is a lightweight URL discoverer. It hits the company's site, finds the careers page, and stops. Cheap, fast, handles 80% of the work. Agent 2 is a classifier. It takes the URL from Agent 1 and decides which ATS the company is using based on signals on the page. Domain patterns, embedded scripts, response headers, still cheap and handles another 15%. Agent 3 is the heavyweight. It only fires when the first 2 fail. It spins up a real browser, renders the JavaScript, navigates the page like a human would, and pulls out what the others couldn't. Slow and expensive, but only used on the 5% of cases that actually need it. Here's the model selection logic that makes this work. Agent 1 runs on a small, fast, cheap model, something in the range of a few cents per 1,000 records. It's doing pattern matching on raw HTML. You don't need a frontier model for that. Agent 2 runs on a mid-tier model with structured output enforcement. It has to make a categorical decision and emit clean JSON, but it's still working from text signals. Agent 3 runs on a frontier model because it's driving a browser, looking at rendered pages, and reasoning about what's actually on screen. Different models for different jobs. The cheap models do the boring work. The expensive model only sees the cases that genuinely require it. The cost math on this is brutal once you actually do it. If I had thrown all 10,000 records at the heavyweight agent, the run would have cost me hundreds of dollars and taken more than a day. With the escalation pipeline, the same run cost a fraction of that and finished overnight. The reason is simple. 80% of records never reached the expensive agent at all. 15% stopped at the medium agent. Only 500 records ever hit the heavyweight. So most of the run cost almost nothing, and the expensive cost was concentrated on the cases that actually needed it. The main thing to remember is your agents are not all created equal, and they shouldn't be paid equal. An escalation pipeline routes the easy work to the cheap agents and the hard work to the expensive ones. On this build, cost per company dropped by an order of magnitude compared to throwing every record at the heavyweight. That's not a small optimization. That's the difference between a system that you can run and a system that you can't afford. Layer Layer 3, durable batch architecture. When you process thousands of records, things will fail. Not might fail, they will fail. The internet times out, APIs rate limit you, a site returns a 500, your laptop sleeps, your power goes out. If your agent has to start over from record 1 every time something goes wrong, you will never finish. So the third layer is durability. Let me show you what the queue actually looks like. Every input record gets a row in a durable store. That row has a unique ID, the input payload, a status field, an attempt counter, a last attempted timestamp, the agent tier currently assigned to it, the output payload once complete, and an evidence field for the citations the agent produced. The status field is a state machine, pending, in progress, completed, failed, escalated. Every transition is logged with a timestamp in the agent that made it. So at any moment, I can look at the queue and know exactly how many records are done, how many are in flight, how many are stuck, and how many have been escalated to the next tier. This is row level durability, and it matters. A lot of people try to do this at the batch level, run a batch of 100 records, save the result, run the next batch. That sounds reasonable until the 7th record in batch 43 fails and the entire batch rolls back, including the 6 records that succeeded. Now you're reprocessing work that you already paid for. Row level durability never has that problem. Every record is its own atomic unit. If record 7012 fails, only that record is retired. Everything before it stays done. Everything after it keeps moving. The agent reads the queue at startup, picks up where it left off, and only processes records that aren't already done. If the entire run crashes at record 7012, the next run starts at 7013. No data loss, no duplicate work, no human intervention. This is what makes overnight runs possible. Without durable state, you're not running a system, you're babysitting a script. Layer 4, Watchdog and recovery automation. Now we're getting into operational territory. A production system has to detect its own failures, not after the fact when you check logs in the morning in real time while it's running. On this build, I run Watchdog processes every 2 minutes. The Watchdog has a simple decision tree, and the tree matters more than the implementation. So let me walk you through it. Every 2 minutes, the Watchdog checks 3 things. First is the queue making progress. Has the count of completed records gone up since the last check? Second, are there records stuck in the in-progress state for longer than a configured threshold, meaning an agent claimed them but never finished? Third, has the failure rate spiked above the run's normal baseline? If progress is being made and nothing is stuck, the Watchdog does nothing. Silent, no notification, no log spam, the system is healthy. If progress is stalled but there are no stuck records, the Watchdog assumes the agent process has died cleanly and restarts in resume mode. The agent picks up the queue and keeps going, no notification, the system fixed itself. If there are stuck records, the Watchdog releases them back to pending after a cooldown, meaning whichever agent claimed them lost the lock, and increments their attempt counter. Still no notification, the pipeline self-heals. If the failure spikes above baseline, or if a record has hit its max retry count, or if the cost ceiling is approaching the configured limit, that's when the Watchdog notifies me. Because those are the cases where a human has to make a decision. Not when an agent has retried, that's automatic. Not when a record was reassigned, that's automatic. Only when something is wrong at the system level and you need to take a look at it. Most production builds suffer from one of two extremes. Either they fail silently, the system stalls and nobody notices for hours, or they fail loudly and every micro event triggers a notification and you stop reading them. The Watchdog pattern is in the middle. The system handles its own failures and you only hear about it when there's something only a human can decide. Quiet by default, loud when it matters. Layer 5 is evidence-based guardrails. This is the layer that separates AI output from trustworthy output. Every record the classifier processes must include the evidence behind its answer. It can't just say this company uses a specific software. It must include the specific URL, the specific signal, the specific signature it matched. Every output row in the queue has an evidence field and the schema requires it to be non-empty. If the agent can't produce evidence, the answer is rejected at the schema layer. It doesn't go into the output file. It goes back into the queue marked for the next tier to retry. Let me give you a concrete example of what that catches. On one run, the medium tier classifier returned a confident answer. This company uses Greenhouse. But the evidence field contained a URL that when followed did not actually contain any Greenhouse signal. The page was generic. The agent had hallucinated the connection. In a typical pipeline, that wrong answer ships. It ends up in the customer CSV. They use it to make a decision. The decision is wrong. They lose trust in the system. In this pipeline, the wrong answer is rejected. The schema validator looks at the evidence URL, fetches it, scans for the claim signal, and finds nothing. The record gets reassigned to the heavyweight agent, the one with the real browser, which can actually verify what's on the rendered page. The heavyweight either confirms the answer with new evidence or returns a different answer with new evidence or escalates the record as genuinely undeterminable. This eliminates hallucination at the architectural level. The agent literally cannot output a confident sounding wrong answer because confidence without evidence isn't accepted by the pipeline. This is how you build OpenClaw systems that businesses can actually rely on, not by hoping the model is right, right, but by requiring proof and rejecting everything else. So a quick recap: 5 layers, spec as code, so the agent's contract is enforced and not improvised; an escalation pipeline, so cheap work goes to cheap agents and expensive work goes to expensive ones; durable batch architecture, so failures don't lose data and runs can resume; a watchdog with quiet recovery, so the system fixes itself and only escalates real human decisions; and evidence-based guardrails, so the output is verifiable instead of hopeful. Get all 5 right and your build stops feeling like a science project. It starts behaving like an infrastructure. And that's it. Now let's talk about where this pattern actually wins, because I used an ATS classifier as the example, but this is not an ATS pattern. This is the pattern for any workflow that is high volume, partially ambiguous, and failure prone. Let me walk you through 9 real ones, and on a few of them, I'll show you exactly how the layers map. The first one is vendor detection beyond ATS, Workday versus Greenhouse versus Lever, but also Salesforce versus HubSpot versus Pipedrive, or AWS versus GCP versus Azure. Same architecture. Cheap pass scrapes the obvious signals, medium pass classifies, heavyweight only fires when signals conflict. Second example is tech stack detection, CMS, analytics, payment processors, hosting providers, CDN, email infrastructure. This one maps almost perfectly onto the same pipeline. Most of the time you can detect a stack from response headers and inline script. Sometimes you need a rendered browser. Run it as a tiered cascade and you get accurate detection at scale for a fraction of what a tool like BuiltWith costs you per record. Third, compliance verification. Does this company have a privacy cookie, a cookie banner, accessibility signals, GDPR disclosures? Same shape. Cheap pass checks the page for known patterns. Medium pass classifies the policy text. Heavyweight verifies the disclosure is actually displayed to a real user, not just buried in the HTML. Fourth, procurement intelligence. Does this company use a specific platform or tool you're trying to sell against or sell into? This is a goldmine for sales teams. Same architecture, tier the work, only spend money on the records that fit. Fifth, lead enrichment pipelines. Find the contact, verify the email, confirm the role, validate the company attributes. Most enrichment vendors charge you per record regardless of difficulty. Build it yourself with this pattern and their easy records cost almost nothing. Sixth, directory normalization. Resolve the official site, the canonical careers URL, the LinkedIn profile that actually matches the business. Anybody who's tried to clean a list knows this is a nightmare at scale. Tier it, cheap pass for the obvious matches, heavyweight for the ones that are ambiguous. Seventh, competitive monitoring. Periodic checks across thousands of competitors with automatic restart on failure. The watchdog layer is what actually makes this practical. You said it once and it runs forever, only pinging you when something genuinely changes and requires a decision. Eighth, document or web classification at scale. Triage with a cheap pass, classify with a medium pass, fall back to a deep pass only when needed. Anywhere you have a pile of unstructured input that needs to be sorted into buckets, this is the pattern that matters. Ninth, fraud and risk screening. Lightweight signal scans first, IP, device, behavioral patterns. Deep investigation only on the uncertain cases. This is exactly how the most sophisticated risk systems in the world work. They don't deep investigate every transaction, they tier it. The pattern is especially strong when you need 4 things at once: a cheap fast pass for the easy cases, an expensive deep pass only when something is genuinely hard, durable row level progress so you never lose work, and automatic retry and restart so you never have to babysit it. If your business has a workflow that fits those 4 needs, and most B2B workflows do, this is the architecture you're looking for. And one last really important thing, none of these 5 layers are OpenClaw specific. There's no checkbox in OpenClaw that turns on durability. There's no built-in watchdog. The platform gives you the tools, the workspace files, the agent primitives, the Lobster workflow shell. What separates a production build from a demo is whether you compose those primitives into the 5 layers I just walked through. This is the engineering work. There's no shortcut, but the framework is repeatable. Every OpenClaw system I build uses some version of these 5 layers, just configured differently for the workload. Once you internalize the pattern, your build velocity goes up, not down, because you stop debugging the same fragility every time. And remember, none of this matters if you don't understand the fundamentals of multi-agent systems. The escalation pipeline is just a roles decision. The durable queue is just a memory pattern. The watchdog is just a workflow rule. These 5 layers are not 5 tools. They are 5 expressions of multi-agent fundamentals. Get the fundamentals right and every tool gets easier. Get them wrong and no platform on earth will save you. If you want the full OpenClaw production guide, I'm dropping the PDF in our free school community. The link is in the description. Inside, we share setups, breakdowns, walkthroughs, and more. It's the absolute best OpenClaw community on the internet, so make sure to join. If you found this helpful, like and subscribe. I'm sharing OpenClaw content every single week that goes way beyond the surface level. And drop a comment below. Let me know what you want me to cover in the next video. I read every single comment, and I'll see you in the next one.